From away they came to live upon this land, and ships they sailed here, woman, child, and man, creating abundance till their markets overflowed, exporting crops along these eastern shores, exporting crops along these eastern shores. From away it comes the food to feed this land, in trucks they transport it for woman, child, and man, bringing abundance till our markets overflow, importing produce along these eastern shores.
I don't think there is any stability in the food supply at this moment in time. We import 80 to 85% of our food. From where is debatable, but much of it comes from the States.
This time we're going through, these years right now, this 10-year interval, you know, I think from what my grandmother wrote and my great-grandmother wrote, that, you know, with Canada's economy the way it is right now, we're going through the Roaring 20s, equivalent to the Roaring 20s. Well, what came after the Roaring 20s? The Dirty 30s. The Dirty 30s is coming, and we're not equipped like we were in the Dirty 30s to feed our people. Everybody was sustainable.
Discarded fields escape the poisons of man. Forefathers cleared them, every rock by hand, with spade and blade, tilled hills and glades, for modern man, for modern man.
I have an area picture from 1942, I think it is, and a dozen orchards, orchard, 4 acres on our property here, an orchard over there, an orchard. They're all gone, not one of them is left, you know.
In the late 1800s, early 1900s, there was 6 times more farmland, more agricultural land in Nova Scotia than there is today. But that land was allowed to grow up. Families moved off the farms, got city jobs.
My husband, in 1961, when he started doing AI service to cattle in this county, he was doing 470 farms. And when he left in 2002, he was doing down to 5 farms.
You know, I always say that I'm a farmer with a bit of a smile because I know people laugh. People laugh when they say that because it's kind of a joke. You know, there are no young farmers out there anymore. How many 23-year-old farmers do you think there are? Or how many 16-year-old aspiring farmers do you think there are?
Nova Scotia was a net exporter of food. You know, we supplied not just apples, we supplied grain down the eastern seaboard. We were a net exporter. And now we are importing, 85% of our food. And the soil is still here. There's another farm, there's another one, there's another one, there's another one. There are all kinds of places you could grow stuff.
We're losing the ability to be able to do it, you know. There's so many, like I say, it's like, farming is like painting a picture or building something unique. You know, you have to have skills, and those skills are being lost, you know.
So we need young people out there desperately. Everybody does, and especially the city folk, because the basic question is, where's your food going to come from?
People are complaining a lot now about, you know, the high price of food, the high price of oil. Well, the price isn't high, the price is becoming realistic, you know? The fact that I can buy a 50-pound bag of potatoes for like $8, that's not realistic, you know?
You have to be able to compete with, you know, the $8 or $10 an hour jobs to, you know, to be able to hire your manpower.
Young people do not want to work all day for what someone else makes in an hour working off farm. And it's really, really attractive for people to go out west, to go to Halifax.
We went to the farmer's market last year, and we figured that we were making about $2 an hour after we factored in all of our time, you know, the driving there. But we did it, you know, we did it because we really loved growing food, and we really loved going to the market, and people really appreciated our eggs and our honey and our vegetables, and, you know, it made us feel really good. But if we didn't live the lifestyle that we do, you know, if we lived in a house in the middle of town and we had to pay rent or had a mortgage, we could never afford to do that. You know, farming last year for us was a bit of a game, right? And so now, you know, we're really trying to produce ourselves our own food. But could we grow enough, you know, for like to sell enough to make a living? No.
There's not a great deal of money in it, but it's a very enjoyable, it's a way of life. We can make a living at it. Besides working off the farm with the portable sawmill, I have to have that to help. But every year we're making a larger and larger portion of our income from farming. And we'll soon be at the stage where we can survive on the farm income. So we've been here 10 years, and unless you inherit a farm, to buy one, it's a long, hard process to build the infrastructure and to get the soil back into shape where it's producing something. Before we bought the farm, for 30 years they made hay off it and put nothing back into it. So it was completely run out. And the soil is really coming on strong now. It's got a ways to go yet, but it's producing much better than it has in many, many years.
So farmers do it out of love for doing it. They certainly don't do it for the money, because it's very difficult to make money as a farmer. You can survive, but you survive because you can eat your own food.
The people want the product. We want to grow the product. The government will not let us in a lot of cases, whether it be raw milk, whether it be raising meat birds and turkeys and selling them direct to the consumer. It's just government regulations that inhibit us, and it's very frustrating. Some farmers get together and say, oh, we need more subsidies, you know, we need this, we need that. I don't want government subsidies. I just want to be left alone to farm. I don't want their money. I want the freedom to farm.
You know, if you go to a country like France, you can pick up cheese at every little farm, and you have a different cheese and a wonderful cheese, and it tastes great, and it's interesting, and it's sustainable. But you know, here in Canada, we can't have the freedom to produce those types of things.
I don't know how many butchers in the neighborhood shut down over the last 20 years because of, you know, they changed the health regulations and made it harder and harder, and I can see the same happening here, you know.
I'm not going to do anything that could harm my customers. It'd be foolish for me. One bad batch of milk or whatever would put me out of business.
I think that as a species, we've survived all these years on that very food, and yet there are claiming, the powers that be claim that we're going to succumb to eating those kinds of food, which is ridiculous, or we certainly wouldn't be here today.
In the Meat Inspection Act, there's a clause called farm gate sales, and essentially it says that if the animal's raised on the farm, processed on the farm, and the customer comes to the farm and buys it, the customer is basically the inspector. If the customer thinks you're running a good, clean operation, they're happy with the product they buy, they are allowed to buy product from you. Right now that applies only to beef, pork, and lamb. If that were extended to poultry products, to raw milk, to dairy products, that would be a wonderful thing.
There are all sorts of unregulated terms that trick people into thinking something is a better product, a better food. Natural is not a regulated term. Organic isn't really a regulated term. The only thing that really guarantees safety as far as organic food goes is an organic certification from an organic certification body. And if people don't know to look for that, they're completely taken in.
Really, I don't want to be labeled organic. I want to be labeled grown in Nova Scotia. That's the real distinction. Because if we put all our emphasis on being labeled organic, what distinguishes us from organic lettuce from California or organic garlic from China?
People need to be made aware of what they're consuming. It affects their health. There's no way we should be buying product without knowing what's in it, so that we can make our own decision as to whether or not we want to consume that product.
So how that's been grown, what poisons have been put on it, we have no idea. So the labelling should be completely straightforward. Where is it grown and how? And that would make a big difference, I think, so people don't understand just what they are eating. But vested interests won't like that.
If I'm buying a food, the first thing I want to know is how cleanly it's produced. So what I would look for first is a label that indicates a certification from a recognized food certification body. So for instance, in Canada, we would look for OCIA, Organic Crop Improvement Association, which I think is a North American certification for organic foods. I would be very leery of something that says organic trademark or organic registered trademark, and I am also very leery of something that says it's an organic product and then the certification body that they use is not something that I've ever heard of and is not listed in any organic certification body directories. So it's actually just another company owned by the company that's producing the organic trademark food.
Things should be labeled if they're genetically modified or irradiated or treated in any way that's not natural. Yeah.
And if people were aware of how much GMO substances are in the food, they'd have a fit.
American soybeans, American corn, Canadian canola is not able to be marketed in Europe because we can prove that ours is GMO free. You know, it might be, but it might not be.
If genetic modification were truly for the production of the best, safest, cleanest food so that everyone could benefit truly, then perhaps it wouldn't be such a big scary thing. But what genetic modification generally seems to be all about is market protection.
For a commercial reason, it's not worth the risk, no. Plus it could go anywhere, right? How do you really know what you release by releasing it?
Genetically modified food, as far as I know, was developed and thought up as a way to save a starving planet, and I haven't seen evidence yet to support that. I just see a whole lot of headaches coming.
I don't think that GMOs are the answer to any problems that we have. You know, we need to be looking at nature for examples of how to solve our problems, and not kind of taking this godlike role into our own hands, as far as I'm concerned.
When you look at the basics of what's going on here, it's just a way of some companies getting hold and control of the food system with precious little thought of the consequences that GMOs can do. You can't play God in these things. You don't know enough. And so the dangers of this are and will be dramatic. We will see changes in people, we'll see changes in nature, we'll see changes in the earth and the land, all for the detriment, possibly making money for one or two vested interests. And that's really what it's all about. It's much cheaper to work with nature.
I think it's scary. It's the worst thing we could ever possibly do. I would far rather err on the side of caution than to experiment with something thinking, oh, this probably won't hurt us. There's just not enough research. Genetically modified crops really scare me.
We're way too young to be playing with our food like that. It's, I mean, when you think how briefly we've been on the planet as humans, to think that, you know, to toy with our own nourishment, I think is to bring about an abrupt and unhealthy end.
We grow the same garlic we grew 20 years ago. You know, we don't, unless I want a new variety, or then I buy a pound or two, and if I like it, next year I have 10 pounds, and the year after I have 50 pounds. And the Terminator seed is, you know, a commercial invention in order to prevent a farmer to save their own seed, because it actually will not germinate. You know, it only gives you one shot at it, and then the offspring of that seed is dead seed. Like, you can eat the flower, but you can't plant the seed, you know. So that's, I think it's disgusting, actually.
You know, it's become part of our journey here to learn how to save seed. And it's such a delicate thing, you know? It's like, it's a science. You really have to know what you're doing. And for these people to, like, be actively decreasing the genetic diversity of what we've already got, you know, there's stuff going extinct left, right, and center. It doesn't need our help.
I think it's something that a lot more people should be paying attention to, because it's potentially a extremely big deal. You know, and a lot of people are fighting it right now. And that's really important work. I mean, it's a big battle. You know, they're up against some pretty powerful kind of.
What they're trying to do is create and get control of the whole seed system in order to be able to control the food system. This is what it's all about. And bear in mind, a seed that can grow in one place may not necessarily grow in another, and yet they're trying to make the seed the same everywhere. And so the local conditions get swept under the board, and so the Terminator seed in practice will probably bring in starvation.
Now we're seeing the results of that kind of economic view of everything. And basically the bottom line issue is that what we need as human beings for our own survival, our own well-being, has been taken over by a greed mindset. And so everything that we need becomes a commodity.
How do I feel about terminating? Well, I don't. I think it's frightening. I think that if you terminate the seed, you eventually are thinking in terms of, terminating life.
I think the world as we know it today is not going to exist in 30 years' time. It's going to be a very, very different world.
People are so resistant to change, or even they've got their blinders on and they just don't want to see what's happening and what's going on in the world, and the whole equation of population going up and there being a limited amount of resources.
Things are at kind of a tipping point right now where they can really go in two directions. I don't think things can really cruise at the place they are now. Something's changing.
It's going to get to a point that when we have to start eating like alternative foods and stuff, all the organic and all the food that's actually worth eating will be either by the people who are willing to grow it themselves and willing to slaughter it themselves, or by the people who are willing to pay lots of money to get it done for them. And everybody else will just have to deal with the what's made by science or what's altered by science. So, yeah, I'm not looking forward to that.
When I had my children years ago, I used to think that I used to worry about the specter of war, that they were someday, when I grew my sons, they were going to have to go to war. But there's been a new enemy come into the picture. It's not so much that they have to go to war anymore, that's that they might be hungry. That's a real picture now. I really think that this country at some point is going to be hungry.
Hunger is not a good thing. And we don't need to be hungry. But hunger and food and nourishment of the heart are all one in one. And I think that if we don't lighten up about all the advantages that we have here in this country, if we can't do it,
The worst case scenario would be we continue as we are. And when we're looking at the control of the food, and bear in mind, he who controls the food controls the world, and us. And there are only 2 or 3 companies now who virtually got control. They're over and above government, they're global, and if and when only one is left, then it's going to be a form of slavery.
I talked to one potato farmer in New Brunswick, and he had acres and acres of potatoes and a small garden next to his house with potatoes in it. I said, that's kind of odd that you've got your own little potato patch here. So when you've got these acres of potatoes. He said, I don't eat those. He said, they're sprayed 17 times a season with pesticides, herbicides, fungicides. He said, you think I eat those? He said, these are my potatoes.
One of the worst things I've read about lately is the fact that chickens have been so overfarmed in the past 30 years that they contain absolutely little to absolutely no omega-3, which is like one of the more helpful things for human brains, for thinking, for growth in their mental abilities. So if you see how chickens have been farmed for 30 years and how much that's drastically changed the health value of a chicken, I mean, if it goes further and we keep farming cows the same way, and we farm fish the same way, and we farm everything that's generally a meal along with our plants and vegetables, I could see it just completely diminishing the actual nutritional value and overall just destroying the health of most people, because we won't be able to get anything out of what we eat. and be stuck on supplements and alternative methods of nutrition.
Organics is the good, clean version. It's the non-smoking, non-drinking, non-cocaine, no heroin version. You know, the other stuff is food on speed.
Why is fast better? I happen to be a cook. I like cooking. I don't like to cook fast. The food isn't that I produce quickly, does not usually come out very good. And we've become habituated to quick. So once we get habituated to quick, then food becomes just an item of some kind of, it's a meaningless pause in a busy day.
We are energy beings, and the food has to have energy in it. It may have a lot of bits and pieces, but if there's no energy in it, then it's no use to you. And we see the problem of gross obesity now, because people have to eat and eat and eat to try to get some energy out of it, and look at the result, which is rather tragic, especially for little people, young people. Their future's condemned by this system. And so, yes, we've got to get the quality, and we've got to measure the energy, which isn't done yet. We can do it radionically, which is what we do. There are other ways of doing it, but unfortunately in science they have difficulty accepting the idea of energy. And if they can only overcome that, then there's hope. At which point then we may get quality. But the quality can only come with working with nature. We can't suppress or subdue nature, which you do with conventional agriculture, sprays, fertilizers and so on. But working with nature, the quality goes up.
I don't think we as Nova Scotians can ever be totally self-sufficient in food production, but I think we can reach a much more balanced approach than we are right now.
We have the potential to feed ourselves. There's no problem. That it can be done with the right support from the government.
I'm sure we could turn it around from being 85% importer to being 75% self-sufficient, you know. And then perhaps we'll drink a little bit less orange juice and some more apple cider, you know. There are subtle shifts.
I think people need to start being very active in their own individual support of local farming by doing whatever they can, no matter how inconvenient it is, to help keep things going.
What used to be called a farm in Nova Scotia was a holding of about 10 acres, and it'd be 5 acres cleared and 5 acres in woods and a house and whatever. That was a small holding, and it was a sustainable agricultural holding. Now they're calling it lifestyle residences, and people from the city are coming here and buying up these small holdings and keeping a goat outside, or, you know, just a few ponies or whatever, and it's a lifestyle. They're calling it, and this is what's happening to our little farms. They're going for lifestyle. It's the thing to do now. You know, if you're in Toronto and you're about to retire and you've got lots of money, you grab up a little farm in Nova Scotia.
And it's creating a huge problem for people who actually want to farm now, because they can't afford to get the land back.
Governments will have to bite the bullet. They will probably have to pay people to go back on the land, because they've done such a devastation of getting people off the land. And many other countries now are addressing this and getting people back on the land with various incentives.
Even if the government has to give out lots to people to get them started, because there's a lot of Crown land out there that's not being used. There's a lot of land that could be bought up cheap and divided up and say, okay, like they did, like Fidel Castro did in Cuba.
Like Cuba, when was it? 89, when the Russians pulled out. That economy, or the agricultural economy, was based on sugar, on monoculture. They didn't grow their own food. They exchanged sugar for oil, for beans, for flour, for everything. Canned peaches from Hungary, whatever. And bang, it was over. 1 year to the other, 89, the end of Russian money. And for 2 or 3 years, basically a famine, not a famine that people were dying, but they were losing weight, you know, and there was a shortage of food. And they were able to turn it around. So Russia gone meant no more oil, no more fertilizer, no more pesticides, you know, it just cut off totally from one season to the other, let's say. None of that worked anymore. And their response was, there's a guy with a team of oxen, and he's 60 years old, and here 10, 20-year-olds from Havana, you want to eat? Here's your home, you know. This guy will show you how to do it, and here's the oxen, and you have the manpower. And first of all, you feed yourself, and then a third of what you will use, we pick up and we'll take back to Havana and feed. And it took them 2 years, and they came to a balanced diet. And now they call themselves the largest organic farm in the world. And it wasn't their choice, it was like necessity. They were forced into it. But there are no pesticides used, and if you have a field and it needs to be cut, okay, you might have a tractor and you might have diesel fuel, but you also have 10 people. Now you're going to think, am I going to burn that diesel fuel to cut that field, or will I use my manpower to cut that field and I save that fuel to run the generator to keep the milk cold? What's more important, you know? And they had to make these choices, and as an individual or as a group and as a nation.
The difficult thing is how can people who don't have access to land, how can they engage in that? Because there's always going to be people who live in apartments, people who live in, of course, who are economically depressed situations. I mean, that's a lot of Nova Scotia anyway.
You can, you know, if you've got asphalt out back, just put it on top. You know, how many people have said, just plant on top, you know, build your garden.
The tendency for plants is to live. So, you know, you can take a lawn pretty easily and turn it into a garden. We've done that here this spring. You know, this was all grass all around us here, and now it's an abundant supply of food.
Gosh, what we have left is hard, because not only do we need to live a life that's, you know, low impact, but we need to clean up some of the stuff that is already here, and so that feels like twice the amount of work.
Food supply is a big boat, and it takes a big spot to turn it.
We have to learn, we in the West certainly, and in the East too, as well as the South now, we have to learn that this fantastic, and I'm using this in a negative sense, this fantastic dream that we've created, this great illusion of this Western way of being in the world, cannot be sustained.
So for young people, I don't know how you start. I mean, how do people kind of raised in an age of everything being a widget, a commodity, a comfort, a thing, understand the core nature of food? It's right there. No one ever took it away. Just took your attention away from it, that's all.
This goes way back to a lesson I learned when I was in my 20s. Mike and I went to Jamaica and spent some time there, and lived in a community called Davyton and above Mandeville. And this was a community that had never had electricity. And so they lived off the land, and they lived simply. And they were really strong and healthy. And they laughed a lot, and they had time to to spend with their children. And for me, it was the first real experience of seeing people that were not doing without electricity because they'd never had it before. Of seeing firsthand all the things that they didn't have that enabled them to have a better life. That's the way I saw it. I didn't see poverty. I saw this incredible wealth of spirit.
When we look at organic and beginning to work with nature, then the next step actually to biodynamics is when you look at the whole of nature. And this is the key. I always talk about the principles of biodynamics. The first one is crop rotations diversity. We had mixed grains, wheat, barley, oats and peas, which made a complete ration for whoever's going to eat them. The livestock, chickens, cows, pigs, whatever. We would probably have something like high protein oats, which by themselves are a complete ration for chickens. They have protein 20% or so. You don't get so much per acre, but you get a much higher protein. And we put with it clover every time within the mix, because clover provides nitrogen. And the beauty of putting it all together, it's like the old guys used to know, is that you get far more energy out of that mix than if you have them grown separately then put together. You may also then grow buckwheat and things like that, which not only can you make pancakes out of, but it also is a wonderful soil conditioner and a few other things of this nature. And then you may end up with winter rye, which is a very handy crop because you sow that in the fall, and then it's way ahead of the game in the spring when everything else is, you can't even get in, it's too wet. But the point of rye, of course, is allopathic against weeds, so you can control the weeds this way. In the garden, of course, you need rotations of one form or another and companion cropping. The next part is livestock, because if you're trying to sell crops and you can't, then you need some livestock to feed it to so you don't waste it. You have horses, donkeys and a few cattle. Plus geese, chickens, guinea fowl, ducks. All those animals eat differently, eat different levels, and eat differently, so they complement each other. They have a happy mix, and this is the diversity is necessary if you want to have a sort of biodynamic principle. You don't want just one animal. And part of it comes into the third part, which is the compost. Because the compost is all important. But the cow has to be present because it has 4 stomachs. And that's the beauty of the cow. But there's some people who like to say, I can make compost within 5 weeks. Sure you can. You muck it around, you move it about, etc. And it looks nice. There's no energy in it at that time. Whereas we take 2 years to make the compost properly, because it has to have time in order to create the energy. And all the bugs and the beetles and things got to breed up, and the bacteria and everything else that's in there, so that it gets to full strength. And so we have this sort of rotation. And ideally, if you can keep building the compost heap on the site of the previous one, then you in fact inoculate the new stuff from the old, and then it makes much better compost. And if you put a set of biodynamic preparations into it, then you've got a far better compost heap. Now these biodynamic preparations are rather like homeopathic medicines. They're made out of plants, and the principal one is made out of the dung of a cow, which is put in a horn and buried. And it changes its state over about 6 months. And it becomes then literally a homeopathic remedy. It's very powerful when mixed in with water. Because our objective here is to grow food with a much higher quality, with infinitely less input of energy. And so we use the free energies of the cosmos and the earth and all pyramids. When you consider that using a small area with a greenhouse and a pyramid, we can grow so much of our own food without having to buy any of the energy in. It's just the pyramid energy itself. At the corners, we've planted potatoes right on the corner, both inside and just outside the corners, and we've been getting up to 40 potatoes per plant on the corners. People have heard about planting to the moon. Above ground crops you plant before the full moon. Below ground crops after the full moon. And if you just do that, you're going to get it right. And the last is so important, it's not considered unfortunately in conventional agriculture, is looking after the flora and the fauna of the farm. So you've got to create a habitat, hopefully, for birds and the butterflies, especially the bees. I mean, here now we're beginning to understand this, growing all the wildflowers as possible, keeping them there. And I mean, if you don't spray, you get all the wildflowers coming back. And so the beauty of biodynamics, amongst other things, is these 5 principles all involved as a whole. We have to look at the farm as a whole.
Advice to young farmers. Pick something you enjoy doing, whether, you know, if it's growing crops, if it's a type of animal that you enjoy raising, just, you gotta enjoy doing it. If you think, well, I think I can make money on this particular thing, that's not good enough, you know. You gotta love it. If you don't love it, you won't stick at it.
The answers are different for every situation, and every piece of land, every little patch of garden is going to be different, and the personality of the person who's doing it will have a different result.
Don't expect any great things to happen the first year, because it won't. You know, you work with it, and you keep working with it, and you get to know it intimately. You get to know your soil. You get to know the climate for that particular area, even that particular field. We have fields that have microclimates that are different at the bottom of the hill than they are at the top of the hill. So you get to know your piece of ground. And 5 years is up, you'll say, I finally know them. You know, I've lived with this soil here long enough, now I know it. You know, we can get along together. We're going to be able to work good together.
It's definitely long term. You don't get into farming. You can't bounce around from farm to farm or place to place. You have to sink your heart and soul into it and plan on a lifetime at it.
There's a wonderful program, organization, used to be called WOOF, I think it still is, Willing Workers on Organic Farms. As a young couple that wants to farm, you buy the booklet, you buy a membership and it gives you the book. It's all on the internet too, but anyways, the way I know it is as a book. And 50 farms, 40 farms in Nova Scotia, 800 in Canada that are listed in that book. And they all describe what they do and what their requirements are. And pick a few of them and go traveling, you know. Work in Ontario on a vegetable farm for a few weeks, work in Quebec, work, you know, pick your season. If it's winter time, go to California. Or if you're interested in a certain type of farming, what an opportunity, you know. You live with a family, you don't get paid, but you get room and board, and in exchange for room and board, you put in an honest effort, let's call it.
You should sort of imagine 20, 30 years down the road, whatever it is, where maybe you think, now I've finally got there, I'm now successful in the context of creating what we wanted. What would I be doing when I step out of my door first thing in the morning? Is it going to be a joyful way of stepping out? Or have I got the next 3 hours of chores to do? And if you can't answer that question with a happy smile on your face, then don't do that. now before you start.
We spend probably 10 or 12 hours a day, you know, providing ourselves with our basic needs. I don't watch TV, but at the end of the day, I feel incredibly satisfied. You know, I wake up early and I feel rested. And I don't wake up and think, oh man, I gotta water the garden. You know, I gotta harvest potatoes. This sucks. You know, I look forward to my days. There we go. Fresh grass for the evening.
In the future, one of my best scenarios would be that people would start asking for a local product and seeking it out and not taking no for an answer, and that this place will continue to be self-sufficient and maybe even profitable one day, and that one of my 3 sons would be interested in taking this over and add one more generation to the list. I would probably roll over in my grave if I see houses built on this farmland or bushes growing on it.
Best possible scenario is everyone who has any patch of land grows food.
If you're from an area, I feel like you should be getting most of the things that you need from that area, and that should include your food, it should include like your energy, and it should include your transportation, it should include your building materials, it should include, you know, everything.
I have customers in Mahone Bay and Lunenburg, but I'd rather have farmers in Mahone Bay and farmers in Lunenburg supplying those customers, and so that, again, we're not getting this distance involved with our food, and that I have a group of people locally here within a couple of miles that I supply with food, and then these farms like ours are just dotted all over Nova Scotia.
We need to start making changes in how we live rather than changing the world to make it easier for us to live. That we need to kind of take a bit more responsibility.
Our whole framework is out of order. You know, there are so many people doing so many good things, and the common thread that links all those people together is that they want, I don't even know if I could put a word or a label on it, but we all just want to save the world, right? Like, we really want our children to live in a world that's better than the world that we live in today.
In essence, we've got to look after the world. And therefore, we've got to look after all the creatures of the world, plus the land of the world. And we've got to be self-sufficient in food. They all go together. And if we have a system whereby we're producing the food that we need, and we can do, both environmentally and ecologically correct, which means biodynamics, in fact, then there's some hope for the future. And what I would see out there is that the land repopulated with many, many smaller farms.
It matters to me. It matters that the business lasts. It matters that people still have their jobs. It matters that, you know, that what we do, if we're going to make a change, is going to be for the better. And I think that we're about to make a turn that, you know, who knows what we're up against. But here we are in paradise. You know, we're so lucky, aren't we? We're so lucky to live here. You know, we've got all the opportunity in the world to take what is surrounding us and treat it in a way that it's going to come back and feed us and nurture us in more ways than one.